Alright guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to go over this great email I was sent from a subscriber. That's from a guy, I believe he's in his mid-50s or so. He is a father, has two kids who are like in their early mid-20s now, and now ex-wife. And he is now a free man, being that obviously he's been divorced for a few years. And he shares his story how he has the last laugh on multiple fronts against his a-hole ex-wife and equally a-hole daughter, who he is now disinherited, because this guy's done quite well for himself in his retirement accounts and all that, as well as he's pretty much disowned her. And he's going to go through this whole thing here that many of you parents are going to appreciate, how he tried his darndest to be a good husband, good father to his kids, but the constant conflict with his wife and how her spoiling the kids and all these other things led to a little demon called his daughter. And eventually, enough's enough, and our guy's free. And he is kicking butt and taking names on so many levels now that he's free, but my God, the crap he goes through. And there's a lot of really good lessons in this story, guys. I'll point out along the way, but you guys will definitely appreciate that, especially you parents. He's been watching for a while, and he's been eager to tell his story. Now, here's the thing, guys. This guy's story, and it's a long story covering a few decades, is long. So this will be the part one of 3 videos, which I'm going to do, because I'm not going to do all one shot, but I'll play them all tonight. So you guys watching this here on a Saturday, you get it all before you go to bed tonight. So, and if you're overseas, you can watch it tomorrow during breakfast. So it starts off, says here, "Greetings SSM. I love your stories, and I've been moved to share one of mine. I saw your story on a daughter who was a rotten brat, who was disinherited by her father, who she repeatedly disrespected, and here's my similar story as promised in the comment section of that video. First, a bit of a backstory to show you just how ungrateful my daughter is. My ex-wife and I couldn't have children on our own, so my kids, a boy and a girl, are adopted from a foreign country. This required 2 trips entailing a month in total to a country where we didn't speak the language and about $45,000 in expenses plus unpaid time off of work. The experience was horrible mostly. There were some highlights, but for the most part, we felt like prisoners in an apartment because of the language barrier. I bet you he adopted his kids from China. I know a couple that did this with their kids like 20-some years ago, and the way he's describing this here, and the money it costs and all that, I think they're Chinese kids. But hey, that's great that you did that. But given how this story goes, what a little freaking ungrateful brat for what you did. I was a skilled union construction worker back then, and my salary was almost double what my wife's salary was at the time, in spite of her finance degree from a private college. Hey, how about that, huh? Which was paid in full by her parents. In addition, I remodeled our first house in my free time, which had been hired out to do what it cost about $50,000 at the time, which netted us a nice profit when we sold it to buy a larger home on 3 acres before the age of 30. In addition to that, I did some side work for cash that totaled about 1/3 of my wife's salary in addition to my paychecks. So you guys can hear here, this guy busts his butt to provide for his wife and now kids. And this guy's a jack of all trades. This is awesome. Every wife should want a guy like this. Every kid should want a father like this. I point this all out now to show that it was me who shouldered the burden of provision and sacrifice my extra time working side hustles and home improvement to make this happen for the majority of our marriage, while she benefited greatly from my earnings and did nothing extra. Brother, your story is all too common. Later on, finances come into play when the roles are reversed. The country my kids were adopted from has a policy of turning the orphan kids out into the streets at the ripe old age of 16 years old. Since getting work is dependent on connections in that country, there is very little hope of legitimate career opportunities for orphans who aged out of the system. And almost all the boys end up going into petty or organized crime, and the girls into prostitution, if they ever survive that long. That would have been their future if we hadn't adopted them. Well, you and your wife, I'll give her credit for that, did a great thing. Unfortunately, you're going to see how this goes. My kids had a good life. They had nice clothes, good food, a nice warm bed, private education for kindergarten through 8th grade, and parents who cared for them. We met their every need and a very large number of their wants. Sounds like you're spoiling them already. And they're in private school. Now, given the state of public schools out there, I can't blame you, but still, you got to watch those things. Additionally, they were very involved in sports and activities over the years, something I didn't have growing up. A few of them were very expensive. My daughter was in dance, and this really is a key to the story. And if any of you know about dance, it starts out to be reasonable cost, but as they approach middle school, the fees go up exponentially. In high school, they go up again. And if your child has any ability, which our daughter had a lot of, they are recruited for the competition team for an additional expense, which is almost as much as the regular lessons. In essence, almost double because of the frequent travel around and out of state. Well, your dad to your daughter, your daddy, and you want to give these nice things to your daughter, and if the daughter's a good kid, if you can afford it, cool. But when your daughter's a spoiled little shithead, then she shouldn't be getting such things. But the problem is, as you're going to see, gentlemen, there's the way this guy wants to raise his kids, and there's the way his wife wants to raise the kids. Parents have to be a united front, and if they're not, there's major problems, amongst many other things, as you're going to see. Well, during that time, I started seeing the writing on the wall, and my knees and back weren't going to be able to go the distance to retirement age, so he opened a business to get me out of my job that involved heavy physical labor. Unfortunately, money got tight during the several years it took to get the business up and running, and I started having a problem with the money that was being spent on dance because more important priorities were being neglected. There you go. I don't blame you if you want to get out of construction, do something else that was really wear and tearing your body here. But if you weren't making as much money as you're building the business, things had to be cut. But oh, no, you're going to cut daughter's dance or anything like that. Also, I noticed that credit card balances were growing and reached $50,000 at one point. $50,000? Smack! The shareholders of American Express and Capital One, thank you for your business. But other than that, holy crap, dude. Now, I know this wasn't all you. This was your wife's actions. But my God. You know how much interest you're paying on all that shit? Again, I'm an American Express stockholder, so I'll be holding that to the day I die. So I appreciate the business of all the folks that do that. Another important detail is that dance is filled with girls from families that have way too much money and spoil their little princesses rotten. For the rest who are regular people, it's a constant battle dealing with demands from your own child who's constantly whining about all the material possessions the other kids get. And why don't I get them too? I'd remind your daughter that where she came from, and you can send her ass back to where she came from if she keeps that shit up. I know you want to do things for your kids, but the problem is, and I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are normal folks, regular Joes, when your kids are around spoiled little assholes, from whether their families are wealthy or they pretend to be wealthy, that's tough because your kids, why can't I have that? Or why can't I get to go there and stuff like that? That's tough. But you got to stick to your principles. Otherwise, you're going to have little hellions growing up. For instance, my daughter went to a 7th birthday party one time for one of her dance friends, and the birthday girl's parents gave her a brand new iPhone to open in front of all her friends. He says, what an a-hole thing to do. Why the F does a 7-year-old need an iPhone? And why flaunt it in front of all the other girls like that? Too many girls get a brand new car for their 16th birthday, clothes, vacations, etc. And my daughter was constantly throwing it in our faces that we didn't give her those things, instead of being grateful for what she did have. Again, I can send your ass back to China, honey. So, let me give you my opinion on this. In my opinion, I think a lot of the parents that shower their kids with very expensive gifts and have them show it off, it ain't about the kids. It's about them. It's a status symbol. No different than the parents driving a fancy car they can't afford, having a giant house that they can't afford, having a lifestyle they can't afford. It's all showing off. It's the same thing with the kids having a 7-year-old with a fucking iPhone or a 16-year-old getting a brand new, foreign expensive car on their birthday, that type of thing. It's to show what the parents can provide. I'm going to keep it on the down low where I live, but I live in a part of Florida that has a lot of wealthy people. And it is as common as can be to see high schoolers driving around in fucking Ferraris and Lamborghinis, Porsches, Mercedes, all the fancier cars in varying degrees. And is probably in their name because the parents, it's their status symbol. It ain't about the kids, it's about them. And that's a terrible thing to do. Anyway, well, because of my concerns, my wife offered to work the front desk a couple days a week at the dance studio, which she claimed would cover the expenses of dance. Since she was very convincing and our daughter was extremely talented, I relented in spite of my daughter's growing attitude of entitlement and increasing tantrums when asked to help out with the chores around the house. Smack! You're the dad. You're the leader. You should not have tolerated that shit. If your daughter's become a spoiled little asshole, even though we're going to find out that it's primarily his wife's actions here, still that is somewhat on you, sir. You have to lead and draw a line in the sand and say no. And if she throws a little tantrum, okay, you little shit, I'm going to take away this. You going to keep throwing a tantrum? Okay, little shit, I'm going to take away this. You keep throwing fucking tantrums, you're going to have nothing in your bedroom except a freaking potato sack to sleep on. That's how I was raised. I didn't fuck around with my parents. Problem is our guy here, he's dealing with his goddamn wife. But you got to be strong. Appeasement doesn't work. Fast forward to around the time my daughter was 16 years old. Oh God, I'm sure that was fun. She had done 2 seasons on the competition team, and during this time, my wife reassured me that her salary from working the studio covered all the costs in spite of my gut feeling that it did not. Always trust your gut. She also signed our daughter up for the high school dance team, which she told me was only $500, which I found out was actually $5,000 because they were going on a trip to Disney for a week-long competition. $5,000, try $50,000 to go to Disney for a week-long competition. Any of you parents out there will get that joke. This put the total annual cost of dance at around $12,000 per year. The cost of these activities were purposely hidden from me. You should have done your homework. I think you didn't want to do your homework because you didn't want to get into a fight with your wife and daughter. And mind you, this was $12,000 probably like 10 years ago when $12,000 bought a lot more. Another pertinent detail here, I've always been frugal and concerned about money. My wife, however, felt that she had to live up the fantasy lives of her coworkers and frequently ate out at restaurants, ordered takeout, and stopped off for fast food often. She demanded expensive jewelry for anniversary gifts and a new car every 5 to 6 years, which I drove mine for 20. And because of her lack of control in her diet and sporadic manic episodes of weight loss, she needed to upgrade her professional wardrobe several times a year to adjust to her weight gain and loss of roller coaster. Demanding jewelry? Yeah, that'd tell you everything you need to know. How about you demand that her ass can fit in a normal pair of pants? This is not going to work. Guys, it's rare you're going to have a married couple see completely eye to eye when it comes to finances and everything. Usually you're going to have one that's more of a spender and the other is more of a saver/investor, but you got to be close. This is an exact polar opposites of each other. This is a disaster. And this is where you had to lay down the law or get out. You can't build wealth with somebody like this. Rarely. At one point, I estimated her convenience food purchases to be the equivalent of a car payment, which I ate crappy leftovers for days on end and cooked myself and drove a beat-up old truck while she drove nicer, newer vehicles. Another interesting detail, at the time of our divorce, my wife's weight was over 100 pounds more than it was on our wedding day. Shocker. That's what happens when you're eating fast food and junk food all the time. McDonald's and KFC appreciate her business, but your husband, you having to see her fat ass every day, did not. You should have you had more than enough grounds to end it with her a long time ago. But I know you did it for the kids and all that. My wife's reliance on convenient food was an irritation for me for several reasons. When my daughter was a junior in high school, my wife filed for divorce and blindsided me with it. Well, that's usually how it works. You should have been rejoicing. Like, thank God, I can leave the fat bitch. I immediately offered to go to counseling and work on the marriage. Smack! Why? You had a way out. I know now what a huge mistake that was. If I had processed at the time, it would have saved me about 5 figures in the payout ordered in the division of marital assets because of how good my retirement portfolio was doing. While that was a huge kick in the junk, my presence in my son's life during that time was, I think, worth it. Oh yeah, by the way, he has a son. My wife agreed to work on things, and we went into 3 different counselors, all of whom were flakes and had tunnel vision about how I needed to work on myself while completely ignoring any of her faults or areas needing work, such as habitual lying, her spending addiction, or parental alienation with the kids. Of course, it's always the guy's fault. Why shouldn't it be? Because we're all a bunch of fucking morons. What a load of crap. So now, on to why my daughter is persona non grata with me. During the reconciliation process with my wife, I happened to overhear several conversations where our marriage was being talked about as if our daughter was one of her BFFs who was being asked for advice. They didn't know I was listening, and our daughter was giving elaborate opinions as to how my problems, aka boundaries, were inappropriate, saying that I was controlling and abusive, but nothing about why my wife's actual behavior caused this. She was full-on team mom and saw nothing wrong with her mom's behavior and everything wrong with me. Now, obviously, the daughter's taking the side with the mom who lets her do whatever she wants. That's what happens when you don't have a united front. The kids will side with the parent that lets them do what the fuck they want. You were appeasing, which caused a lot of this, but also your wife's a giant fat-ass asshole. It caused all this. True, your wife could be manipulating your daughter for her to take her side. It's a possibility, given her actions. But still, your daughter has been a little asshat for years. And it's going to be proven countless times as we go into this story. Well, I had been self-medicating with alcohol up to this point to cope with my depression and dead bedroom. Smack! Terrible idea. Don't poison yourself. And she's going to use that against you. Apparently, my wife told everybody but me that I was an alcoholic. I told you she's going to use it against you. They're not stupid, guys. They're very plotting and scheming, and She even started attending meetings for AA during her lunch, and I later learned by checking her office message app when she brought her laptop home and left it unattended that she was announced every meeting to her coworkers and the office chat. She's going to the AA meetings to set the stage, the narrative. She's so mistreated and in such a horrible environment. It's all show. One time in a conversation with coworkers, she declined a lunch invitation because she had to go to an AA meeting, but she suggested they meet for drinks after work instead. Oh, okay. He says, talk about hypocrisy. Rules for thee, but not for me. This was blatant character assassination since she never discussed my drinking being a problem, but broadcasted to anybody who would listen. She was probably coached by her lawyer to do this. Not that I'm blameless here, to be fair. I did make it easy for her to use it against me. Although in marriage counseling, she did admit that I was not an alcoholic, but she did have a problem with how much and how often I drank. Oh yeah, I'd be like, well, I have a problem with how much you fucking stuff your face with goddamn Kentucky Fried Chicken and Dunkin' Donuts every day, fat ass. When I found out that she was going to meetings and what she was saying about me, I dumped all the alcohol in the house and told her I quit drinking. Well, good for you, man. But I had 2 requirements from her in exchange. Number 1, that she immediately and completely be transparent in the family finances. And number 2, stop trash talking me to everyone who would listen, including her alienation tactics that she was using with our kids. She agreed. Both of those lasted about 2 minutes, I later found out. There was no way she was ever going to stop. I mean, come on here. I would have added part 3, stop stuffing your face with junk food and go on a freaking diet, lady. During this time, the bedroom was still dead. Shocker. But then again, can you really get it up for a chick that big? And that feeling in my gut was gnawing at me that there was some inappropriate behavior going on outside our marriage. Obviously, she still had urges, but I was not the beneficiary of those being fulfilled. Again, that's, in a way, it's kind of like, why would you want to, given the way you describe her? I caught her very often self-pleasuring, including in bed right next to me when she thought I was asleep. Damn, dude. Define self-pleasure. Was it actual, self-pleasure like we think, or was it like a bucket of chicken? You never know with her. And she would do that after rejecting my advances right before that. So I bought a GPS tracker and put it in our car that she drove. I didn't find any evidence of infidelity, but I did see a lot of interesting stops for food at the gas station, fast food places, and restaurants. See, I'm not that far off with her pleasuring herself by stuffing her face a bucket of chicken while you're in bed. none of which showed any purchases made on our bank statements at those dates and times. I was going to a chiropractor for a few months for my back injury, and she came to me one day and demanded I give up those treatments, which were helping my pain, to quote-unquote save money. Unfortunately, I weighed my options and agreed to stop going to save a whopping $65 a month deductible. Smack! Bro, what the hell? You're having back pain. This is to treat you, and you're going to give that up so she can just have an additional stop at Burger King or whatever, or more crap for your spoiled daughter? Are you nuts? You can see here how you didn't help your situation. You learn later on, but early on, my man, my God. The reason I didn't confront her yet about her secret spending was that I was still trying to prove infidelity with the GPS and didn't want to tip her off. Okay, are you trying to say that's why you kept quiet about the $65 thing, to not rock the boat so you can... This was your long-term strategy? Okay, if that was the case, perhaps I can get it, but still. This is nuts. Well, it came to a head in summer. I went into our room and saw her pack a bag full of pills. I looked up the name of the pills, and it was a diet pill that cost around $100 a month. So here she is, packing fast food in her face 3 times a week, eating gas station donuts, so her 300-pound giant ass can grow some more. And I had to give up on pain treatment so she could spend almost double on the diet pills. There you go. Well, I confronted her about the pills, and she immediately started crying and making excuses how not only was she losing weight, but it was helping her mood and her skin. Yeah, it's really helping your mood because you're such a pleasant person, sweetheart. I raised my voice and said that I knew about the fast food in the restaurants because I saw the evidence in her car, and now she was denying me pain treatment so she could buy diet pills. Well, she went into full Tuscan Raider. If I wasn't so mad, I know I would have busted out laughing at her. The tears, the snot, the snorts through her crying. It was epic. Bag Handbook Chapter 2. Then I got really serious and started demanding to know where the money is coming from. Our agreement was for me to quit drinking, was contingent on her being transparent with the finances. Yeah, I had to know there was no way she was going to be truly transparent about that. After a bunch of ugly crying and stonewalling, she admitted that she was stealing the money from our daughter's dance studio where she worked the front desk. Whoa! Holy crap. What a great girl. Later in the process, I learned that she was lying to me about the cost of dance, and there was no way her salary was covering the cost of dance at $6,000 per year, which is double what she told me it was. I think you said before it was $12,000 a year, but I guess that's with the Disney trip and all the other crap in there. I did some digging into our bank records, and there was not one payment made from our accounts for the last 3 years of dance. Aha! And that money's going to Kentucky Fried Chicken. She was stealing lessons from the studio, and since she didn't deposit her paychecks from the studio and instead took it as cash, and based on her character, I would wager that she never paid 1 penny of those paychecks towards lessons or expenses related to dance. I would also bet she either spent that money on things she knew I wouldn't approve of, or stashed it away for the divorce. By my estimation, she stole around $15,000 in lessons, which is a felony and eligible for 15 years in prison, not to mention she stole God only knows how much cash as well. Well, this should have been a dream come true for you. Well, she works in finance, and this would have been the end of her career. On the advice of my divorce attorney, I did not turn her in, and to this day, that is a huge regret of mine. Smack! Both to you and your attorney. I always say listen to your attorney. Fine print here, as long as your attorney has a brain. Why wouldn't you turn her in? She's getting away with this now. Well, during this time, I also heard that my daughter was complaining, shocker, to her high school boyfriend about supposed shortcomings of mine, which I was never able to get the particulars on. So much so that the boy's mother forbade her son to come to our home. On another occasion, when my son didn't complete the chores he was directed by his mother to do, I was made to order him home from his girlfriend's house to complete the chores immediately, after which he could return to her house. He came home with an attitude towards me instead of his mother, who actually ordered him to do the chores and made me call him. He became aggressive and started challenging me to a fight. What? Like, okay, you little asshole, take your best shot. If I did that to my dad, he would knock me on my ass, even though he was so much older than me. My dad was a Marine. Boom, I could have been down like that. Holy crap. What? So your daughter's an a-hole, your wife's an a-hole, and your son's an a-hole. And again, you contributed to this, I gotta be honest with you, even though you didn't mean to. But your wife's the major person here. It got heated, and when our daughter came down, oblivious to the actual situation or the particulars, blurted out to me, "Why don't you just leave?" Up to that point, I was making an effort to reconcile the marriage, but that broke something in me. I was done. Thank God. None of this reconciliation crap. So guys, that is going to wrap up part 1. And we're going to go into part 2, our guy's done, and the path towards getting away from all these a-holes and having the last laugh and all that. So I get this part was frustrating. This is the frustrating part with the things he went wrong in. But we all make mistakes. But our guy is now going to redeem himself, and you're going to see the evildoers get what's coming to them. I'll see you in 2 hours.